RPA was designed to make coding easy for business users. We are designed coding easy for the AI and AI management easy for the user. So if you look at all the traditional iPaaS RPA systems, you are still wiring everything up on your own. And where the AI platform comes in, it can understand all the different integrations, create it, execute it and run it, observe the outcomes of it, figure out if there's an error, go back, debug it, and maintain it. I've seen a lot of neural network architectures and only a few survive the test of time. This architecture that we have right now, Transformers, is really good. I don't think we'll be switching between architectures that rapidly.
Hey everyone, welcome to Economics. My name is Sid Sahu, and I'm joined by my co-host Aditi Chernaby. Let's dive in. Today, my guest is Jiquan Ngiam. Jiquan has had a fascinating career in AI, where he started his PhD at Stanford with Andrew Ng. He then moved on to become the first employee at Coursera, building the first machine learning course and the broader platform. He then went on to serve a long stint at Google, working with Google Brain on various deep learning projects. And very recently, he started a company called Lutra AI in 2023. Lutra uses foundational models to automate repetitive tasks and empower business users to be able to build software. It essentially integrates with an enterprise's business apps across all of their APIs. It takes all of the data across multiple systems and provides the user the right set of tools to be able to automate workflows, otherwise very manual and very repetitive. Jiquan, I'm very excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thanks, Sid and Aditi. Thank you for having me on the podcast. Super great to meet all of you and share my AI experience with your listeners.
Welcome. So tell us a little bit about what motivated Lutra and what's the name about?
I want to answer that question part first. Lutra is actually a genus of otters. And if you look behind me here, there's a little otter on my cute little shelf here. And why otters? Otters are really good at using tools. And so when we're thinking about the name for the company, we wanted to find a name that indicated like, hey, AI is really good at figuring out how to use different systems, how to use different tools to get things done. And otters came to mind. And besides, the domain was available. But what really goes behind Lutra is that concept that we're in a world today where AI is able to understand a lot of the world around us, the tools around us. I've always been interested in AI and technology. And seeing that evolve over time was just fascinating. And at Google, I was there and I saw all these amazing models that could do, produce lots of text, produce images at a point of time. And in about 2023, we all saw this ChatGPT moment. GPT-4 was able to now reason, program code. And from that, the realization that I had was, hey, these models can understand how to use our software right now. They can understand how to use the applications we work with, the tools we work with, the tools we have, and be able to orchestrate across them. So the genesis of Lutra was really around that. If AI could help us access applications, go between software, do all the manual boring things that we're doing, copying, pasting from one to the other, how awesome would that be? And then on top of that, you can reason on what to do, how to do it. And so for all the tasks that we might find challenging or very manual otherwise, the AI could do it and could give us new, what I call superpowers, be able to do new things that we couldn't otherwise do before.
That's really nice. So tell us a little bit about, is it for B2C or B2B?
Where Lutra is today is something for B2B. We do have a nice consumer audience who are using the platform to test it out, try it out. But really after that, what they realize that can we actually move in and bring it into our organizations to use? And so what we see is this AI adoption curve usually starts with individuals playing with it for their own purposes, doing some data enrichment, data gathering. And then they start to realize that if I could do that in my own system with my own CRM, that would be so awesome. One of our earlier customers was this team that they had a bunch of people that were spending, I think was on the order of like hundreds of hours, many days a week, going through and updating records in their CRM because this data wasn't available in some database they could buy. And they were Googling, and in this case, it was like real estate agent information. They were Googling them one by one, updating it, making sure the names and emails were all right. And then we introduced them to our platform, and they realized the possibility of AI to, number one, gather and retrieve data on the internet, fish out the data you need precisely, but more importantly, connect into their systems and update it directly too. And that was a very nice little microcosm of a use case that shows how this works.
Tell us a few more use cases, or maybe how you have designed Lutra as compared to some of the other tools that might be in the market.
Yeah, certainly. The core design of what we want to do is get AI integrated into all the systems. Our observation at a very high level has been that a lot of work occurs where you need to get data from multiple systems, um, and then figure out how to manipulate it, manage it, maybe transform it in some ways, and then get it into a new system. Now, number two is that in the enterprise, there has been an explosion of SaaS software. Right? The number of SaaS software systems enterprise buys just goes up and up and up. And that what that means as well as an individual knowledge worker, you're going in between systems. You're copying and pasting things. For example, if you're working and talking to a customer yesterday and they're working in a scenario where they have a call center and their agents were needing to pull information about their customers and then talk to them. They need to work with their scheduling system, their own internal CRM, a different system that they get some health record data from, and 7 different systems. And that's the problem today. And when they're doing that, it's slow, it's tedious, it's manual, prone to errors, and that's not great. So how we designed Lutra was thinking about what if an AI environment you work with, imagine something like ChatGPT, Claude, one of those things. It's not just siloed to the things that it comes with, but you can connect your systems to it. It can understand how to interact with other systems and push and pull data from all of them very seamlessly. So that's how we think about it. Initially, we're seeing a lot of use cases start with very generic things like email processing. So extract data from my email, categorize it, draft replies from it, maybe put some data out for customer support tickets, figure out sentiment on whether the responses are good into a spreadsheet so I can monitor and analyze how the responses are going. So email, spreadsheets, web research, those are, I think, where we see initial customers start with today. And where we're going next, I think is really exciting, is that when you start to see the possibilities of what you can do, you start to imagine, what if this works with my system, my database? What if it works with my emailer? What if it works with my reporting system with data metrics and so on? So we're seeing that shift in customers where now the basics works, very generic productivity use cases, but the excitement comes with the internal integrations into the systems they work with, which maybe sometimes not that easy to integrate with.
So actually on the topic, how do you handle integrations today in Lutra?
No, good question. So we have a very specific point of view on it. One of the things that we spend a lot of time on is actually thinking about if an AI platform was designed to interact with lots of integrations and other systems, what is the right interface for that? And I think this is still an open question. Some people in the field are looking at, why not have the AI point and click, use the browser and then go forth and get things done. Now, we think that's really good for long tail situations, but it's very unreliable.
So just to add that, what we're also seeing is people are using agentic AI, LLMs, to build those integrations.
Yes.
Are some of those things on your roadmap, something that's already in Lutra?
So what we do is that we work integrations very much at 2 levels. We design an AI, what I call AI computer interface layer, which is a bit similar to Model Context Protocol from Claude, if you've seen that one. It's our version of that. And what we do is that we then convert how APIs are designed in the external world to that layer, then to the model, right? And that layer design turns out to be very important, because how you tell the AI how to use a particular API function or anything in the world that really impacts on how good is it at doing that. For example, do you want to give it, from an engineering perspective, good type systems so it understands how to do types, stuff like that. So there's a lot of design work in there. Perhaps the most exciting thing that we're starting to roll out this week to very early customers is the ability to automatically ingest integrations. And what that means is that today, for our very early customers, you could give Lutra a URL to an API documentation. It will read the documentation, figure out the authentication specification, figure out the data models you're working with, figure out the actions they should implement, make a plan of that, and then implement it all in our platform and connect there. And it's, I think our early users tell us that one of them was saying that he tried it out and he was like, his response to me was, you're right, this is pretty magic.
That's fantastic. So that's fantastic to hear a customer delight moment.
Yes, exactly.
I'm going to just shift this real quickly, but what is your view on Perplexity and some of these others coming out with more action-oriented features, being more than just LLMs? And I think Perplexity has made a lot of announcements in the last couple of weeks, and they continue to do so. How do you see Lutra versus Perplexity?
No, that's a good question in there. I think the space is very big, number one. Perplexity does really well in what I think is information retrieval, search, and getting data from the web. And I think they're really seeing now integrations into internal data in companies to retrieve on that too. What's really difficult that you don't really see much out there is when AI takes actions for you. Have you seen an AI that's creating a spreadsheet for you, manipulating it, filling it out? Seeing a spreadsheet fill out itself is pretty magical when you see that happen. That's the area that we spend most of our time in because we think it's where the crux of the problem would be, right? And so when you see AIs writing drafts for you, not in just ChatGPT, but having the draft appear in your Outlook, ready to go, writing responses for you so that when you go to your CRM, Zendesk, whatnot to respond, the responses are ready to go. Or have the AI proactively do reporting and then send you a Slack message. Now, the thing that's very interesting about what I think about AI here is that every business is different in how they operate. And so when I see the foundation model providers, OpenAI, Anthropic, Claude, they're providing us with raw intelligence, AI that's a calculator on words. You can get it to do really amazing things. But just as if you hire a math PhD off the street, you don't want to give them your CRM day one and say, go use it. You're going to be successful. You're going to teach them how do you use our CRM? How do we determine our leads? What's a good lead, bad lead, qualified lead, MQL, SQL? And then you're going to go from there and then help them learn your processes, the way you like to do things. So that layer of what I call procedural knowledge, how to do a task and how a business wants to do it, is so different. And I think that needs to be customized for every company because it's just completely different for how you want to operate. And so how we think about that is on Lutra, we have a whole layer about how people can effectively onboard their AI, teach it to do tasks, show it how to do a task in one or two ways, and then reliably remember it. And our difference there is that when Lutra reliably remembers your task, it's not just remembering a bunch of instructions, English prompts. It's actually going to write some code behind it and have the code represent the task. And that software code is writing is deterministic in many ways and able to capture really the essence of what you're trying to achieve.
I think that's very, very interesting what you talk about there in terms of it being very deterministic and having a memory function to remember. And I also really like the way you described how you prepare the customer through the journey, because that is important from an adoption perspective as well. There's a lot of hype about AI, but only 1% or less have actually adopted it. So I think that could go a long way as well.
On that question, Jiquan, you obviously mentioned that these are powered by foundational models, which are fundamentally probabilistic. Enterprises, however, as you may have seen, are largely deterministic. They're built for very high precision workflows. So how do you think something like a language model within Lutra and a chatbot interface works with an enterprise process, which is largely deterministic? How does that all come together? How do you get the reliability that you need over long periods of time?
I think it's actually one of the hardest problems. If you use an AI model today, tomorrow to give you different answers, that's very awkward, right? It's very unsatisfying that way. I think there are two ways I think about this. One is that the more you can get a handle on the probabilistic nature, as a developer, accept it, that's going to happen. But then can you take that the creative aspect, it's not a bad thing. It's being creative. It's being able to adapt to new situations and then make it deterministic, right? And I think this is actually the crux of it. This is actually where we're seeing most of the adoption. AI being used to do code generation. We're using the AI to generate deterministic software that then is used in a deterministic way. So we take that concept and we went, hey, why have that only be available to developers? What if the regular person could take their workflow, turn it into software, and then use it again, right? Now, the thing is that it's usability. Can this become usable for a regular person to understand the process, be able to do it without having to understand programming, be able to then validate the results and run it reliably, right? So that's how I think about it. The second thing is that often in automation, I think there's going to be a shift, and this is a long-term shift, my hypothesis, which is today, a lot of automation projects are, I think, very top-down still, which is you sit down, you blueprint everything, this is how it works, okay, and then you go down to the details and you scope it out, implement it, and then after you go, oh shoot, that's not what a business user wants. The IT team did something a little bit different there than what they expected. You go back and forth, the project doesn't go that well. What I see in the AI generation is a lot more bottoms-up. There's also adoptions bottoms-up. Some individual on the company figures out, oh, I can automate a very small part of my day with this. I have a spreadsheet. I need to clean it up. The names are in a full name column. I got to split up into first name, last name. Very annoying. People are just doing this manually. We actually notice this in some companies. Right. If I could run an AI model through the first column, get out the first name, last name, that'd be great. That 1 hour of me copying and pasting, all gone, right? How do I do that? Oh, I need an AI system that understands how to work with spreadsheets. Turns out that this is an exact use case, by the way, that someone's using Lutra for today. But then after I do that, I was like, okay, how can the AI system understand which column is the column name, how I want to split it out? Can that logic be deterministic? Maybe I want to split it out by the first space. Or maybe I want to call different AI functions to split it out. I can choose many options there. So on Lutra, what we think of is, okay, run that process through our system. Our system does it for you once. You validate the output, and it can be the myriad of options of how it does it. You like the output, you save it away, and then the system generates code software behind the scenes, a small script for you, and then you do it again. But now this allows you to micro automate, right? You start automating a lot of small things, and you're teaching it a lot of small processes. And over time, you start stacking it up. So,
Right.
okay, I have this process now, A and B. Can you now do process A, then do process B? And now I can do that. So I think there's going to be this world in which bottoms up is happening, where people are automating day-to-day small things in their lives, sharing it with their teams, and then going, hey, I can now chain things up. Certainly governance and oversight is necessary, and like what you can do, how you do this, someone can inspect it. And ultimately, someone may want to look at the automations you're producing and saying, are they doing the right thing?
Could you
Right.
elaborate on that a little bit? You touched upon a point on governance. So in any kind of business, mid-market or enterprise, you would have governance, security, and compliance. And while the hope is that everybody's building their own automations, there has to be a system.
Yes.
How are your customers managing that?
I think the most important part of that, the first layer is access. Now, we all talk about AI agents and what access do they have. I have a very simple answer to that, actually, which is, at the end of the day, every AI software you use has an end user to it, right? So the end user's permissions are the permissions of the AI, number one, maximally. And number two, it should be the end user decides. So immediately out of the box, what you get, if you think of it that way, is that your employees are somewhat responsible for these things. And then there is a way for your IT team or your governance team to figure out how to limit their access, right? So whatever limited access they have, their AI has also limited access. Number one. Number two, I think at the IT team level, governance level, we see most customers starting off being more comfortable with read-only access first. I like my AI read stuff and process data. Let's not have it write first, right? Don't have it create things first. Then over time, you get comfortable with it, and then you say, okay, now I want to give it permissions to write to these things, okay? And then you can do that at two layers. First is that if you're working with a system that does API integrations, APIs have a very good governance layer from the providers themselves. If you use Salesforce or HubSpot, you can configure and say, these are the scopes that this guy can use. Not even on the AI side, you can just have in the API side. So this is actually one big reason why I think API-based automation is going to be much more important than browser-based automation, which is less governed because you can't really tell what's going to click on. The second thing is that on the implementation side, I mentioned earlier about how AI connects to APIs, AI connects to computer use. And that layer that we design has a lot of degrees of control, where you can say, okay, now my AI can only access these few functions. It can't access those functions, right? So that allows another governance layer. And the third layer is, how is the AI actually going to get access to these things? So we care a lot about security. So what we do is that your AI models and how it operates should never see anything about your keys, your access codes. It should never see anything about any secret sensitive information in there. And so that design requires the AIs, in our case, as a code evaluator, be very distinct from where the data access points are. They can't be on the same system, right? And it requires that evaluator that's running stuff be running in isolation for every user, for every task they do. So we do all those levels of isolation there, so that to ensure that none of these things are flowing in the right, none of the secrets are flowing in the wrong direction.
I like the way you described it as your AI layer connects to the application layer, and there is a governance in the middle that actually decides what access does it need to get. As you build all of these integrations, what are some key challenges that you face as you've automated these use cases? Are those largely around consistency, accuracy, or are there other challenges that you face?
Oh boy, yeah. Honestly, the OAuth is the biggest challenge.
I can imagine.
Today, everyone does OAuth differently, so authentication is just a mess across the systems. But we figured a nice wrapper around everything now, so we are pretty happy with that. But that was really a big challenge. The thing in there, I think, is I'll say the biggest challenge there has been, I think, authentication. Really making sure that's solid and well done is one. I'll say, a challenge that we overcome over the last few months as well is just design of the systems. For example, if you said, "Hey, I want to tell," I'll give a very concrete one. Google Docs. Google's one of the integrations we had. Maybe we put it in pretty early. How do you design a Google Docs integration into AI? Do you say, here are all the APIs that Google provides, go use them? Turns out that's not going to work. The APIs are very complicated, very hard to use. And then if you ever tried to say, okay, how can I insert a table into a Google Docs? You probably don't find many answers on the internet because not many people have figured it out, right? So you want to abstract that out one layer higher and say, okay, we're going to design a way for the AI to say, add a table to a Google Doc or any document system, Microsoft Word or whatnot. But the AI doesn't have to think about how to use all the very low level stuff and poke at it and put it in there. It just says, here's a table. And then we figure out a very consistent, again, code generated backend that does that integration for them, right? So figuring out the right abstraction layer can be a challenge sometimes with very complicated systems, spreadsheets, documents, very horizontal systems often have this, and we spend a lot of time designing that. The CRMs tend to be very complicated too, because you can customize your CRMs a lot. So we do a very deep HubSpot integration. You could create custom fields for everything. You can create custom objects, rules here and there. The AI has to understand that. So figuring out how the AI understands that, how it observes your setup and then make a decision is very important. So those are all things challenges that we had to overcome when we're designing things.
So do you see that as your secret sauce and stacking up all these different integrations and having that middle layer be very strong and undefeatable per se to make a difference here?
Exactly. So I think there are two parts in here. One is that design for the middle layer, I think, is still very open on what's the right way to do it in the market today. We have our own point of view on the design, and I think that's going to be one of the big differentiators. Number two, making it easy to bring things into that middle layer is another big differentiator there. Anything that's CRUD-based today is a one-click integration. CRUD meaning create, update, read, which is like the simple writing to a record system. That's actually very easy. Then we have a functionality to allow users to stack on that more complicated logic. And I think that stacking is actually important because if you think about it at the end of the day, imagine your AI system has access maybe to your CRM, and it's going to be able to update CRM records for you. Now, there are two ways you can go about it doing it, saying, go forth and update any CRM. Here's the update, raw update call to the CRM. Go update anything you want, any field you want, right? Or you can say, my company wants governance. I want to add a layer before that and say, when we update, we need to update all these fields. If you leave one of them out, we'll reject it. Now, that layer is something that we allow our customers to program in and say, you can add that custom layer. Don't give the underlying layer to your employees. Use that layer that you're going to give now that ensures all the contracts are done correctly so that the data is updated exactly as how you want it, right? So that customization, I think that middleware, as you're saying, is actually going to be very important here in how we actually do deployments.
So if I take a step back, I think we've talked very deeply about integrations, which is great because that is the biggest challenge in enterprises to integrate with applications. I think you mentioned a lot about CRMs and spreadsheets. Are those the major applications that you see being integrated today? Which ones are the ones where you see the most amount of silos? And what use cases do they pertain to? If you could go into a little bit of detail there.
I think CRMs are one that's comes up a lot because there's a lot of work in CRMs. We have literally employees that live in CRMs, just they do nothing but stare at the CRM every day. And what gets us excited is actually the next phase, which is where we're starting to have a few customers start to do like database integrations, right? Data warehouse integrations, where if you know the models today, the magic of the models is actually that when it understands how to work with one data source, it understands how to work with that data source with every other data system that you have today. And so to your question, Sid, I think it's really that when you have maybe a legacy database lying around, everyone's annoyed with updating it, getting data in and out of it. And once you create that integration layer into that database, it becomes modernized. Someone can chat with it. Someone can do things with it, can update stuff. I have a product database of all the products I'm selling. I can now go through all my products, rewrite the descriptions. So those are the kind of things we start to get really excited about, where people bring in systems that they just are really annoyed with because they've been sitting around for a long time. They add that layer and then now they modernize it. And I think that's actually where we see a lot of opportunity there.
But I think it's a great segue into modernization because we've had about 20 years of robotic process automation, integration platform as a service. We have all of these different applications that have been in the enterprise for a while. So from my understanding, it seems to me that the step change that you're creating is a conversational interface that is making it a lot easier for people to query their systems and to do workflows. It seems like there is a foundational layer that is solving for high judgment use cases, which have unstructured data that can be solved. What are the step changes that you're providing when you go to your customers today and they might already be using like an RPA platform or like an iPaaS platform?
So in RPA and iPaaS platforms, the tricky bit is that you are doing still a lot of the manual work. So, for example, in iPaaS platforms, you have to still set up integrations. Your customer wants it done in this particular format and way, and then you have your own system you're trying to iPaaS and connect it into, and that's a lot of like custom setup that someone needs to sit down and manually do normally for many customers you're working with. RPA is similar, where you set up the RPA, you got to show it how to click and do stuff. I think where the AI tools are coming in, AI generation that we are working on, and so as many others, is can the AI system be smart enough to figure all of that out for us, right? If I give it all the documentation of how system A works and system B works, can it figure out how to make the right wires and connect them up together? So if you look at all the traditional like iPaaS RPA systems, you are still wiring everything up on your own. Some of them are visual. You drag and drop a box, and then you say this goes to here, this goes to there. Drag the if statement box, drag the for loop box, drag the conditional box, and it doesn't make sense for someone to be doing that. And then I think where the AI platform comes in is I understand it can understand all the different integrations created, not only created, execute it and run it, observe the outcomes of it, figure out if there's an error, go back, debug it, and maintain it. So that whole loop of creation, update, maintenance with a human supervisor watching it and making sure that's the right thing, just reviewing the outcomes. I think that's what we're getting to. That's what we're building from a very high level. And I think it's going to be the difference in how these technologies are deployed.
Which is a great point, because a lot of RPA today, I think the pain points have come around the cost of development. And it started as a business user tool that makes it easy for a business user to automate processes. But a lot of business users eventually have to turn back to IT developers to be able to build those automations. So it seems to me that now you can go from process discovery to actually figuring out what the integration looks like, to actually building those integrations and then automating the whole process. So I think to me, it seems like it brings the cost of automating a process down significantly. And that is probably the step change I think that Lutra provides as of today.
I think that the trend is that people are going to be able to do things they couldn't otherwise do before, right? If the business user is coming up with the requirements, they throw it over the fence to the IT team to implement, they throw it back to test it back and forth. You need to take a very long time to get to anywhere. The business user is truly empowered to say, I want this thing to be automated, and they can see it happen in front of their eyes. And what the IT team does is to validate, yeah, you did it, oh no, that didn't work, or they're here to support and help. That process is much faster and tighter. And I think that's going to be amazing. And we're seeing this play out in many places. For example, internally, we use a lot of code generation tools. And my designer on my team, who's not really an engineer, recently was like, let me try it. And he started using the code generation tools to do his design changes. And so he doesn't now design in Figma and throw over the fence and go get all the pixel things right. Because I can just go in there and tell it to make the changes, and it's right. And so all the things that's on his mind can now surface in the application so much faster. And I think that's the same thing. If your business user, your non-technical user is empowered, a lot is going to move way quicker.
Right.
So if I could ask one question, talking about the RPA platforms, what is your advice or your thought process on can they modernize their platforms to catch up as an incumbent?
The more you try to retrofit the AI stuff into what you have, the more it's very awkward and may not be the right fit. So you may need to take a step back and go, okay, wait, if we were to redesign our entire system today with day zero, with everything, we threw out all our stuff we had, what would that look like? And then if we take a step back, one thing that we did a lot was, it's kind of an interesting approach actually, which is, do you design for what are you designing for? Are you designing for the human? Are you designing for the user? Are you designing for the developer? We are designing for the AI. It's very interesting. We are designing systems and integration layers, middleware layers, in which the AI really succeeds. So if you were to take a first principles approach and say, how would you design a computing environment in which the AI is the user? What would you do? Right? That's the mindset that we have generally. At the end of the day, it's a user too. So there's two layers now, right? You got to design for the user to use your application, but your application is going to be smart and talk to other systems. And that layer needs to be AI design.
I think a good way to summarize this is that RPA tools were designed to make coding easy for business users. And now the perspective that you're taking is, now you're taking what AI can do as a capability from first principles, and then how do you solve for those silos using AI and using the capabilities that it has, using code generation, using unstructured data processing, and then you are integrating this in an app in an end-to-end way. And eventually it benefits the user, because the user is taking the first principles capabilities, and it seems to me that you're building some sort of a human in the loop for them to be able to interact with it.
I like the way you put it, actually. RPA was designed to make coding easy for business users. We are designing coding easy for the AI.
That's right.
And AI management easy for the user.
So
I think some point of time in the future, we'll all be managing AIs and we're thinking about that.
I have one last question, Jiquan, before we close out. This one's a little more broader. We've obviously had a couple of years or more than a couple of years of autoregressive models or LLM architectures, and those are the foundational models that we're using in these applications today. We've spent a lot of time at Google working on different machine learning architectures. How do you think this architecture evolves over a period of time? Do you think that this is a good architecture for us to solve for all the business use cases that we're solving today? Is there a better architecture that you think in the future? What does that future look like for you?
I've seen a lot of neural network architectures and only a few survived the test of time. Convolutional neural networks with residual connections and all this stuff. Transformers, which takes a ton of time. A lot of people experimenting with various architectures haven't really panned out yet. My hypothesis is that this architecture that we have right now, Transformers, is really good. We've shown that it scales. We've shown that you can throw more data at it. We've shown that it can do a lot of multimodality reasoning across different modalities. It's going to carry us for quite a while. And I think we're going to go for a lot more generations of improvements on that one. Now, are we going to see a better architecture emerge in my lifetime? My bet should be yes. Something's going to emerge from it, maybe a diffusion model or something. I don't think we'll be switching between architectures that rapidly. I think new architectures are going to be very rare. They need a lot of design. They need a lot of engineering work to make really well and scale up. I think over time, they're not that many. Like if you look at the back history of time, like convolutional neural network, Jan LeCun's invention back in the 80s or 90s. Transformers was attention models actually way back and then used for translations in the mid 2010s. What's really interesting about these things is we learned that the ones that could scale and with scale keep doing better were the ones that lasted. And so what you will see in the research world is actually lots of toy examples, my architecture and that, but a lot of them will not scale. Right? As a user of the technology, I care more about the quality and cost. And I'm like 100% sure quality is going to go up, cost is going to go down. I'm very sure about cost going down. So as someone who's thinking about the technology and going, is it going to be pervasive? As the cost goes down, I think this is going to pervade everything. Not too many years ago, my cell phones are just a big device. It's not great. My computers were like, oh, I bought my first 512 megabyte hard disk. I was so excited when I was like a kid. And now, this thing has a terabyte of space. Something like that. It's like, wow. And I think that's going to be the same thing in 10, 20 years from now. What we consider a big model today, it's not going to look that big anymore.
Yeah.
And we're going to make small models do way better, right? And that's going to be very interesting. Yeah.
I think the big to small model is an interesting argument because we have had a lot of CapEx investment in big models and a lot of CapEx in pre-training, and there may be some rumors that pre-training is plateauing. So do you think that there's a lot of focus now on test time reasoning? And maybe this also comes back to what we were originally talking about, which is the enterprise processes. Do you think that inference time compute will actually help create for better accuracies, and that will eventually become the way we scale the existing architecture of models?
100%. The two things in there. I do sense as well as you're alluding to, I think some kind of not say a wall, but I think we were on a sigmoid curve. Right. Sigmoid curves are this one starts flat and they go linear and then they go flat again. And everyone, when we're on the linear part, everyone's, oh my God, it's going to be exponential. But actually, no, we saturate. The saturation happens in almost every single platform, industry, market, and whatnot, right? I think what's going to happen is that the same thing's going to happen for reasoning models, test time compute. We're going to saturate too. Like after some point of time, adding more tokens to the output doesn't help anymore. I don't think we're there yet. But what's really interesting about the test time compute and the reasoning models is the ability, number one, to have context windows just be huge. Because in test time compute, you need huge context windows because you're just reasoning more and more. You have more and more output tokens that you need to reason through. And then I think that's really important because in an enterprise setting, I don't think it's so much the reasoning engines. It's more like how much data in my enterprise can I put into the models so that it understands my context. Because raw intelligence doesn't know about my company, right? So that I think is actually important, context window lengths. And number two, I think the new crop of reasoning models that reason before they respond, this concept isn't exactly new, as in chain of thought has been around. But what's new is that we now train the model to explicitly do it. And the model can reason for as long as it wants. And we have observed that this significantly improves performance. So we are moving almost all our implementations to thinking models that do this. Right. Maybe here's a very concrete example, OCR on scanned documents. There's a little table in a table.
Yeah.
If you had only a single shot at give me the table, you write it out and you're done, right? You're probably going to make some mistakes in there. But if you say, okay, I write it out, okay, now I check my work, and I write it out again, I check my work, I write it out again, you have this ability to then iteratively refine your outcome. I think it would actually do things like reduce hallucination rates. I think it will do things like improve accuracy because you are cross-referencing data after you produce it. I think this year is the year I predict document information extraction, messy tables of tables and everything by end of this year will be completely solved.
Right.
Reason for that is that you can train models on this.
It's a great point because one of the most important use cases in the enterprise is still document processing. Everybody's talking about language models and their capability to integrate with obviously different apps, but document processing in complex tables is still the bread and butter for a lot of enterprises. And this is a great perspective that reasoning models can actually take those tables, they can understand them more deeply, and they can extract data in a much more accurate way, which comes back to the point is how do you bring up the accuracy of probabilistic models in a deterministic enterprise? And one of the ways is you reason over it multiple times and then you actually get to the right solution and you have some human in the loop that then eventually helps you review all of that data.
Yeah, what we'll probably see as well is that the models get so good, and then after that, I think we will see a situation where the models also self-report. This was I did well at this extraction, I didn't do well, right? So the human in the loop doesn't have to review everything. The models will get to a point where, because of the reasoning, you're not just like, give me the table. You're like, give me the table and tell me whether you're confident. Now, if that confidence score is actually really good, we have a great solution here, right? 99% of the time, you don't review it. The 1% of the time when the model is unsure, you review it. But that doesn't make sense unless you have a reasoning model. Because normal models without reasoning will be like, here's a table, I'm done. You need that second step and reasoning about it. Yeah.
So I want to close this out here. This has been a great conversation, Jiquan, and we've learned a lot from you on Lutra AI as a whole, as an application, how it actually brings up a step change in RPA, not just RPA, but how it actually solves a very specific user problem and integrates across different apps. We learned a lot today. We do encourage everybody to go and check out Lutra AI. You can sign up on lutra.ai. And Jiquan, is there anything else would you like to add for our listeners?
lutra.ai is the website. You can reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter. Feel free to connect. I would love to be in touch and just exchange notes on where you are at with your AI adoption plans and everything and just share what we are up to.